Good afternoon, conversation students. Here we are again, even though we just had a class yesterday. Today we're going to do chapter 7, and it is week 10. Next week, week 11, Monday and Tuesday's class will be on Zoom, so I will try and get those Zoom invitations out earlier, not the night before, and set that up so everybody knows it's coming. But next Monday and Tuesday, expect to be online with a good internet connection and ready to participate, because again, it's your chance to practice the topics that we're introducing. So we will only have 2 new ones by then, so you should know about chapter 6 and chapter 7 pretty well. I should expect by now that you have developed and prepared for your questions after you've done your midterm. So by next week, you should get an email with your midterm grade and a summary of your homework completion rate. So we did 5 homework assignments, and you'll get a number out of 5 according to how well you completed that homework. And then also you will get a letter grade, which is your grade on your, which will be the grade that is the important one. But the number will also be like an absolute number, which gives you sort of an evaluation, an absolute evaluation of what I consider your skill level. So it is a relative curve, a relative grading system. So there's only a certain number of A's that can be given out. So they are kind of scaled. Usually the best scores are in the low 90s, and a mid 80 is good enough for a B+, and you know, low 80s to high 70s starts to get into the C range. Okay, so all that business will be taken care of next week, and of course I will explain to you about how I want you to approach your presentations. It'll be fun. Recording is a little bit stressful, but 5-minute recording is not too much to ask. And these days, with all the YouTubing and, you know, the distancing and everything, lots of people are broadcasting themselves, including me. This is not what I would prefer, but this is what I have to do. So it's a very important skill. Presenting in front of a group, in front of a live audience is one thing, and staring at your camera and trying to be natural like I'm trying to do right now is difficult. The thing I have most trouble with, I think, when I'm recording myself is the fact that you need to think ahead, and when you're recording, long pauses seem kind of unnatural. So you just have to be okay with making some mistakes. And when you see your own recording and you see, well, oh, I was clearly couldn't think of the word at that point, or I pronounced something wrong, or my tongue got tied. This doesn't have anything to do with being a professor, really, or being a native speaker. Everybody makes mistakes. And if you have the time to record over and over again and edit, then good for you. But what I expect you to do is really just speak in English for 5 minutes straight about a certain topic, and then I will evaluate how well you do. It's a challenge. I know about it very well. If you want to see how poorly I was at recording when I started, you can look down on the YouTube, scroll down on YouTube and see how I did when I first started last semester, when our semester was delayed a month and suddenly we went into online mode. It didn't go well. So this is good experience for you, and I hope you learn something from doing it in English. But we will talk about that next week in Zoom, because it's easier to have a conversation about that when it's real time. The grammar point is similar to what I was talking about in composition just recently. It's about modal auxiliaries, which modify the verb. So you end up strengthening or weakening how somebody receives the action from a verb. So you have basically some choices about how strong it's going to be, like might, or ought to, or can. Should being stronger, third person singular, And then you also have need or have to, which expresses an even stronger desire or command. Then you might you also have a choice between using the affirmative, saying something is positive, yes, or the negative. The affirmative means able to do something, agreement. So, for example, exercising can help you lose weight. Using a keyboard can cause RSI, affirmative sentences. Negative, you can't be 45, you look so young. I'm not. I'm 39. So, anyway, we won't go there. The pain just can't get any worse. It's an expression of something not doing something. Okay. So you can modify the actions to make them affirmative, or you can modify them to make them negative, and you can make them stronger or weaker. One of my favorites is, you ought not to. It's a bit of a mouthful, but means you're saying somebody, that action should not happen. Don't do that. This chapter is about health, and so our topic is going to be concerned with that. Actually, for once, the topic heading is pretty, I think it's a good way to frame the question. How do you stay healthy? As you may have noticed, I don't usually even ask you a question sometimes I do, but sometimes in the interview I just say, tell me about health. And then it's kind of a request more than a question. And so I could say, could you tell me about health? Which would be a question. And unlike the textbook, though, I don't want you to identify parts of the human body. And I don't want you to give me physical exercise instructions. I play lots of sports. I know all about those things. Instead, I want you to share with me what your perspective on health is. So similar to the other questions, you can approach this however you want. All right? So you can talk about a certain part of your body if you want. I just don't want a list. Like, I don't want you to start singing me a song like Head and Shoulders, Knees and Toes, right? If you all know that song. I don't need a list of body parts because this is not high school science class. And but you can pick one part of the body. For example, if you have an injury, and you can talk about that. I'm going to start, as sometimes I do. We kind of mix it up a little bit with how we organize the lecture, but at some point I usually give you an example of how you might answer this question. So if I was going to take some part of my body is unhealthy perspective, or one thing I do is unhealthy, I think I might choose by talking about a serious injury that I had. And I don't usually talk about this, or I haven't talked about this because it was kind of traumatic, but maybe you have an experience like this. If you've gotten over it, you're probably able to talk about it. At this point, I'm older and I don't feel bad about it anymore. But the very first semester, I was at Chungnam. I was playing soccer. It was June, and I just finished my first year at Chungnam. So it was June, and it was 2010. And exams were over. In fact, that day I had given my last exam. It was Friday evening. And that week, I was still in my 20s, and I decided that I was going to play soccer. I hadn't played very much since starting at Chungnam because the job was busy. So I was sort of out of shape. But I wanted to get back into shape, and I wanted to play soccer. So I played a few games, and every night I practiced. And then a couple of my friends came over. Actually, one of the other adjunct professors was with me, and one of our friends. And we were just kicking the ball around. And I reached out with my foot as far as I could to catch the ball. We were just playing beside the professor's dormitory, right near where the student dormitories are. And I reached too far, and my Achilles tendon snapped, which is a horrible experience. It's one of the most painful things that can happen to your body. People compare it to the pain you experience in pregnancy, in delivering a baby. I don't really know what that's like, but all I know is the sound of it snapping sounds like a gunshot. So it's like a gigantic elastic band, and it snapped completely. So I thought I was really in a lot of pain, but several hours later, I was just in sort of a state of shock, and I didn't think, I was like, oh, well, it's just a normal injury. It sounded bad, but I can't move my foot, but it must be just like a tear or something. So I went to the clinic. I didn't go to the hospital. I went to the clinic, and the doctor looked at it and he went, oh, and then he did an ultrasound on it, and he's like, yeah, it's your Achilles is ruptured, and you have to go have surgery as soon as possible. So 2 days after that, I was in the hospital and I had to have it reattached. And then I was in the hospital for 8 days, and then I had a cast for 10 weeks, and I couldn't walk. I could only walk on one leg that whole summer. I didn't get the cast off until August. And then I went to Canada on one leg, and I got pushed around on a wheelchair, which was kind of nice because you go by all the lines in the airport, everybody's waiting and has to go through customs, but you actually get pushed around when you have when you're injured or you have a handicap. So that was, I got a special seat too. They gave me a seat with more leg room because I couldn't put my leg close to my body. That was pretty horrible. And so I have to be careful about my left leg. I still play hockey and soccer and basketball, but it's important to stretch properly and not to exercise too hard, because that's what happens. This is what old people tell you, and you're probably not going to listen to me, but it happened surprisingly out of the blue. I had no idea that was going to happen. Just all of a sudden, my leg exploded. Nobody touched me. I was by myself. It's one of those strange events. Actually, when it happens, I looked behind me because I thought something had hit me, like somebody shot me with a gun or hit me with a baseball bat, or a car had somehow snuck up on me and hit my leg, because it feels like somebody has broken your leg, but there's nobody there. So if that ever happens to one of your friends, you know what you need to do. Go to the hospital and get the person's leg checked, because they might have broken their Achilles tendon. There's my story. That's probably too long. I should cut it down. That was a bad example, because some of you in the midterm did what I just did and added a lot of details. And as many of you know, we got behind a few times. Now, on the exam, there's going to be 3 questions. And again, in the Zoom lecture, I usually tend to talk about this because students don't catch it in the video lecture and like, what did you say, professor? But I'll say it anyway. We'll have about 10 questions by the end. I will choose one of the questions from the first 5, which you'll answer again, even if it's one you already did. And then the next 2 questions will be of the 5 new questions, which we're doing in the rest of the book. So for a total of 3 questions. And we only had about 5 minutes each for the midterm, but the exam you'll have a 10-minute slot. So you'll have 2.5 minutes at least per question, and that'll give us a little bit more flexibility if your answers are a little bit longer. But still, try and keep your answers to 3 minutes or less. 2 to 3 minutes is what I'm looking for, right? I said to you before, 2 minutes is kind of ideal for the midterm. And you might talk a little bit longer. Some of you, surprisingly, were happy to speak more, which is great. But, you know, when you have a tight schedule for your midterm and there's 5 students waiting in the waiting room in Zoom, it's even more stressful, I feel like, than having you outside the office, because I can't actually see the students in the hallway. So I don't know how many are there sometimes, but in the Zoom lecture, I can actually look at you and see all the names waiting. Speaking of Zoom and midterm exams, there were a couple people, I'm sorry to say this to you, it's not something I normally do, but I usually just ask people to pay for a textbook, and that's all you have to do. But you really need a better microphone if your microphone isn't clear. And if you get your comments back and one of the comments is microphone or static, or it's not clear, or the volume was too low, I'm sorry, but I'm doing my best. I can only turn my volume up so much. I try to hear you. If I can't hear you clearly, I can't really give you an A+, even if you should be getting one, because I can't hear what you're saying, which means it's hard to evaluate your answer. So unfortunately, just like me, I spent a lot of money, of my own personal money, cameras and speakers and microphone, and I need a new computer really badly, which the university is not going to pay for. So it's just part of our 2020 experience that you need good quality equipment in order to pass your test. I'm sorry about that, but if you have cheap earbuds or a microphone, or you're using a laptop and you're trying to use the laptop built-in sound or microphone, it's usually not good enough unless your laptop is expensive. Okay, so that's one way of handling it, is like just talking about an injury or something like that, an experience about physical health that you've had. So in this unit, it says, describe pain and health problems. That's bullet number 3. And that's one thing you can do, but there's lots of different options. One of the options that they describe on page 82 is about health advice. So one thing I did at the end of my story about my own health problem is I advised you to stretch, warm up, don't overdo it, don't hurt your body, don't push yourself too far, and then you won't end up having the same problem as me. This is good advice. If you want to do your whole answer related to advice, that's also an option. It doesn't have to be a physical injury or something. There's lots of other things that are related to health. There's mental health. Some people chose their priority as staying healthy, but there wasn't a lot of detail about how you do that. So you can describe what you do for physical exercise. You can describe some sort of medical experience that you've had, or an injury. You can give advice about how to stay healthy. You can take, instead of taking, the exercise or physical, muscle and bone sort of approach, you can talk about nutrition. If you want to discuss about healthy eating or healthy schedules, or, how pain or stress is related to health also, these are all possibilities. Mental health is also an option. They don't talk about this that much in the book, but there is, there's something called psychosomatics, which is the relationship between your mind and your body. And I think we all know that stomach aches are caused by stress or aggravated by stress, and vice versa. You can be stressed out and feel sick physically, or you can physically feel sick and then get stressed from that. They have a relationship where they sort of affect each other all the time. So yeah, of course, some of us are very diligent and are in better shape than others. Everybody has health issues. So if you don't want to talk about your health issues, don't. That's not a requirement. You can just talk about, like I said, something a little bit more neutral and less personal, and not talk about your own routine or what you do or what you look like or how healthy you are. You can just take a perspective that's more neutral and just talk about certain types of foods that are helpful to make you feel better, or, how to avoid health problems. There's lots of course, there's lots of health advice out there that's false, and it's basically designed to make money. It's a business. There's a market for health products and health advice and fitness clubs and personal trainers and everything. There's an amazing range of different choices that you can use that are related to improving your health or supporting your long-term health. So, you know, from doctors and therapists and counselors right to people trying to sell you strange pieces of animals from far away. Now, I think it's important, since I'm your professor and I try to be logical, let's keep it reasonable and rational as much as possible. So normally when we're in class, when we talk about this topic, we do talk about some of the myths that are circulated related to health, because I think that's important, that you don't spend money and you don't lose time and not improve your health and don't see results. There's all kinds of magical solutions that look like they're scientific or look like they're traditional, or that many people guarantee you have worked, and they're not effective. So next week in the Zoom lecture, we can also address that, is the fact that knowledge about health is a very precious thing. Lots of people, as I said, chose it as their priority in their life. I think family and health were the two top choices. So this is a good topic for most of you to discuss. You probably don't think about it as much because you're young and relatively healthy. As you get older, this rises from, I didn't care about my health really that much at all in my 20s. But now, as I enter my 40s, it's rising in the list. And at a certain point soon, it's going to be, I have a choice between playing a sport and entertaining myself and getting exercise and relieving stress, or being healthier and not playing a dangerous sport like hockey or soccer. Although soccer doesn't seem dangerous, but certain activities in the sport can be dangerous, and the risk of injury becomes too serious for me to risk it. And so I'll probably retire. I just played soccer coincidentally on the weekend, and I'm still in a lot of pain, and that was several days ago. So that just goes to show your perspective starts to change as your body gets older and you become more mature. So you can decide what perspective you want to take on health. As usual, it's very open, as long as you discuss it in detail and your answer, you know, fits one thing. Don't try to talk about everything. Try and choose a specific aspect of health that you think is interesting, and then explain it to me. Okay? And we will practice, of course, these two topics, charity and our second chapter 6 and chapter 7, charity and health. We will talk about them next week in the Zoom lecture, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and Tuesday afternoon. So thank you for listening, and I apologize again for what happened last week, but now we're back on track. So I will see you next week in the Zoom lecture. Have a good afternoon.